Mr. Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is my pleasure to take a call on the Psychoactive Substances Bill in this second reading, and also as a very proud member of a Health Select Committee, as my colleague Ian Lees-Galloway has said, has worked very, very collaboratively to bring a piece of legislation to the House that I think we are all very proud of. I do want to acknowledge the Honourable Peter Dunn and the leadership that he has shown in bringing this piece of legislation to the House, and to also thank him for tabling a petition on behalf of 3,533 members of the Manurewa community. Mr. Speaker, in acknowledging that petition being tabled, I want to acknowledge Jan Lim, who owns a chemist on Great South Road, very near a legal high shop that was established 2 months ago, I believe, to dump these products as this legislation progressed through the House. In acknowledging Jan, I want to acknowledge Dr Tim Wilkinson, who owns and manages the health centre next door to this legal high shop, who has worked very hard to be a representative and an advocate of our community. I want to acknowledge Mr Johannes, who is the barber in the store next to the legal high shop in my Manurewa electorate, and also young people such as Meliana Ngata, who is the chair of the Manurewa Youth Council, Warriors of Change representative Benjamin Tamarua and Susan Fortunga, who organised a march and the community for the community of Manurewa to come out against this legal high shop, but in support of the Psychoactive Substances Bill. The main point that I want to make in my contribution really has been about the Select Committee process and the number of changes or amendments to the original legislation that we have worked so collaboratively on. I would like to highlight, for example, that in the original purpose statement for this particular bill, nowhere did we state that this bill was about protecting the health and minimising the harm to individuals who use psychoactive substances. So the committee coming to a conclusion that actually this was about instituting a regulatory regime, but coupled with that, at the heart of this legislation was to make sure that New Zealanders in the consumption of these products were going to be safe. And that's a very, I think, fundamental point about this piece of legislation, because these substances aren't drugs, these substances aren't foods. These substances pretty much were unregulated. They were nothings that a whole lot of people capitalised on, packaged them up and sold them to New Zealanders. And the reality of these substances are that they were hurting our community. Technically, I think they were poisons, and so the ability of the Select Committee to, yes, institute a regulatory regime, but fundamentally to say that at the heart of this legislation we are going to protect the health and safety of New Zealanders is something that needs to be acknowledged. I certainly, and I know many of the Health Select Committee members, had been and received communication from particularly mental health workers who were very concerned about their ability to engage constructively, particularly with young people who were going through counselling because they had addictions, and the fact that these substances were legal substances, so they may have got off the drugs, but they were getting into these psychoactive substances. And also one of the things that we made very clear was that there could be a demand on public services in terms of mental health and addiction services, and we particularly wanted to highlight that that was something that the Select Committee had obviously heard, we were concerned about, and so we've given notice to the Health Minister, to the health sector, that that's a possible consequence of this bill going through and regulation of these particular products. I also want to highlight a couple of other substantive debates that we had, and one of them was around the age of purchase. And it was very interesting because, again, from all the professionals who understand addiction, who understand the development of our brains, and particularly concerned about how these substances engage or interact with young people's consumption, again, we're all very clear that we should actually have an age of purchase at either 20 or 21. And it did, I guess, inspire a lot of heated discussion around the table within the context of a bill that we've approved just recently as a parliament in terms of the alcohol consumption age. And I think fundamentally what we have done is to reinforce a decision that this Parliament had previously made. I have to say that I stood on the side of making the age of purchase either 20 or 21 based on the scientific evidence. But at the end of the day, as you will see, and as people will see if they read this bill, what we have primarily done is said that these psychoactive substances fit into the category of either alcohol or tobacco, which is what a lot of the initiatives or amendments to this legislation has replicated. And in doing that, then we had to be consistent, and we couldn't say that psychoactive substances were worse, and so they deserved a higher age of consumption, because from our perspective, alcohol, tobacco, psychoactive substances, all of these products do have detrimental effects on particularly young people. And so to the Manurewa Youth Council and to the young people of Manurewa, we were very clear to both myself and Cam Calder that we should be advocating for an increase in the age of purchase. That's the rationale. And so hopefully they will understand that that's the position that we came to. The other heated discussion we had was about whether or not we should provide a mechanism for the police to engage with young people under the age of 18 who are in possession of a substance. So whether it be an approved substance or an unapproved substance, what we did in the end was to enable the police, through them coming to the Select Committee, to be empowered to engage with young people and to basically confiscate any psychoactive substance that they had in their possession. And to do that, we had to create an offence, but we were very clear as a Select Committee it would not be a criminal offence. We do not want young people to be criminalised in the possession of psychoactive substances, but what we did want was for the police to have the tool to engage with young people, and it was our hope that engaging, they would actually look at whether or not health or social services were an appropriate medium, and worst case scenario there would be an infringement for that possession, but it is not a criminal offence. I would like to just briefly touch on the aspects of sponsorship and advertising. So we were very clear that any retail or manufacturer of psychoactive substances cannot advertise the product or provide sponsorship of the product, which then puts the product out into the market. The advertising particularly is relevant to the shop in the heart of our Manurewa community, the High Zone shop. And so we are very clear, and we insisted on a specific provision. It's clause 53A, which sets out restrictions on what retailers can call shops. So from our perspective, it's been specifically put in to ensure high zone shops or legal high shops cannot advertise and establish themselves in communities like ours. And the other thing that we were very clear about was that local people, so our local boards, have to be involved in the decision-making about where these shops are established. And we particularly wanted and made specific mention of these shops not being near schools, not being able to have a detrimental effect, particularly on young people. And so what I say to Angela Dalton, who is the chair of the Manurewa Local Board, to Colleen Brown, to Simeon Brown, to Toa Greening, who all made submissions on this bill, is that this piece of legislation will give you the tools so that you can protect our communities. So I want to thank once again my fellow committee members. It was a very constructive process, And so I look forward to this bill being passed as soon as possible, because we have to get these products off the shelves, out of our communities, and so I commend the bill to the House. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker.
Kevin Haigh.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I begin by, as others